Let's now turn to an expert for his take on the trade situation between Seoul and Tokyo. We have Waqas ADENWALA, Asia Analyst for the Economist Intelligence Unit, joining us via Skype all the way from Singapore. Hello there.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. How do you gauge the impact of the whitelist removal on South Korea's firms and its economy, first and foremost?
So obviously, since South Korea is a very external sector looking country, and semiconductor devices, automobiles are a big part of South Korea's export mix. Sadly for South Korean companies are set in for a very rough ride. And obviously the economy too, which didn't do well in Q1. Q2 was only lifted by government support. So the rest of the year doesn't look good for South Korea either, sadly.
Right. These export measures impact more than just Korea, reaching the global value chain as well. Could you tell us more about this impact as well?
Oh, absolutely. So since we're talking about just semiconductor devices initially from the first round, and then the second round is going to apply to over 1,100 something goods, which will be exported from Japan to Korea. The repercussions of this will be quite big. Japan and South Korea, both part of G20, the economies are fairly big. And given the supply chains, not just within Asia, but rest of the world. So American companies like Apple, which rely on South Korean semiconductor devices, will be affected. But people also forget, actually, it will be Japanese companies too, which are going to suffer from their own government's decisions. They are, after all, the biggest suppliers to South Korean semiconductors, and also sometimes receivers of final goods from South Korea, such as Sony. So Japanese firms are going to suffer from both the suppliers end and from the receiving end from South Korea's semiconductor devices producers.
So Japan must have known that it will eventually backfire on them. Why did they make this decision, in your opinion?
Unfortunately, it's a series of events that have happened since, I would say, last autumn, when we had South Korean courts deciding on the forced wartime labor decision in the favor of South Korean victims from colonial era. Then there was a radar incident between Japanese and South Korean Navy. Obviously, the dissolution of the fund, which was set up by Japan and Park Geun-hye's government for around 1 billion yen in 2015 for the victims of the Imperial Japanese Army's sex slaves. Obviously, all those events factored in, and then finally, Japan kept feeling that it's a frustration issue that they can't get hold with the wartime issue, first wartime labor issue, because for their perspective, the 1965 treaty is a catch-all thing for the resolution of all these affairs.
Right. And Seoul is planning to take the issue to the WTO. What are the limitations of this move, and are there other ways you would advise Korea to garner greater global support on the matter?
Mm-hmm. Obviously, WTO is a route to go for South Korea, but unfortunately, given that Japan's already made the decision, sadly, it will take time, even if South Korea gets the decision in its favor. By the time, let's say, WTO announces that Japan's decision is not in line with its rulings, it will actually take time, and in that period, it will be the South Korean companies that will suffer. Bear in mind that even if South Korea does manage to get a ruling in its favor, Japan can always appeal it. Like Japan obviously managed to get a ruling in its favor when South Korea banned food imports from the Fukushima prefecture. But then when South Korea appealed, the decision was made in South Korea's favor. The one thing that South Korea could effectively try to lobby for is to garner US support. Obviously, South Korean foreign minister has been talking to her counterparts in ASEAN this week as well, which is obviously a good lobbying forum. But then a lot of ASEAN countries have been recipients of Japanese infrastructure investments. So at best, they're going to maintain a neutral stance. They won't take a very pro-South Korean stance. The only party that has a trust of both sides from a security perspective and trade perspective here is the US. So yes, South Korean trade minister did go to the US last week, but the only problem is obviously under Donald Trump, US foreign policy has become a bit more America-centric rather than looking at regional geopolitics as well.
All right, Waqas, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. We appreciate it.